Hi there, let's talk about Volumator version 1.6. So first off, Volumator now supports projects made in Unreal Editor 5.7. So in total, you can use Volumator in Unreal Editor 5.5, 5.6, and 5.7. 5.7 being the latest version that's currently in development. So anything from 5.5 upwards is good to go. Now, the first feature I want to talk about is the massive new interactive test map content that you can use to train up and learn to get the best out of Volumator as a tool. Even if you've been using Volumator for a while, it's worth checking this out because there's a ton of little tips and tricks and ways to get the best out of the tool. There's two main ways to get there. You can either access it through the setup wizard. Let's just quickly access it. So the first time we open Volumator, we will be greeted with the setup wizard, or you can open it just like I just did now through the help menu. And on the very last page, you will see that we can either close the setup wizard, which just closes the widget and you can carry on as usual, or you can just load directly the Volumator test map. Let's just close this. The other way to access it at any time is just to go to help and then go to test map. Now, either route, it will prompt you to save any work because otherwise you're just going to lose everything you've done. And then it will load the test map. And the first thing you'll notice when we load the test map is a little widget here that opens up looking quite a lot like the main Volumator one. And you can, of course, dock this and do whatever you want with it. Now, the main thing about it is that we have the panels are replicated here and three other little additional buttons. And all of these contain various examples that you can click on to go through. So if we go to, say, example number 1, you'll see that we're teleported to this area. But also, it's important to note that each time you press one of these buttons, Volumator resets all the settings to factory defaults. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of example cases in here. For example, in this test example here, we want to test this volume. It's a specific class. It's a location volume, which is the factory defaults. Now, you may well have changed the default volume class. So it's important that Volumator knows what to expect from the example content. So each time you click this, just know that your settings are going to get reset so that we all have a consistent starting point when we're talking through some of these examples. So as you can see here with build, we start out with just building a simple room just to walk you through the very basics. Then we move on to regeneration, the different generation modes, validation system, just at a high level, the vertices only mode. So this is all pretty basic stuff, rebuilding or adding additional data is a new feature that was added fairly recently, height detection, things like that. And then we go on to more complicated examples like using barriers and visibility, different handling types. And then when we get into the generation modes, for example, here we talk through some of the different generation modes that we have here and the pros and cons of each of them, such as the 2-pass mode here, which is quite a funny one, and the Delavox mode, which again is a bit of an unusual one. So there's loads of stuff in here. We talk through the validation system, which is quite complicated as well, and various tips and tricks here, such as drone debugging and how to handle funny edge cases like this, where you've got gappy geometry, but you still want the volume to sort of fit within inside it. Loads of stuff in here. It's really helpful to get the best out of Volumator. We also have a new generation mode, and that is Voxel-Box. So recently we introduced the multi-box mode, which takes perimeter mode and sort of breaks it down into simplified boxes for like a lower triangle count, lower CPU volume. Let me jump over to the examples here in the generation modes. And here we have a perimeter mode, 2-pass, and this is multi-box. So what it does is it's taken the perimeter mode and then it's broken it down into boxes. And in this case, it'll be 3 boxes that are scaled and rotated as best as possible. So if I take this, recall it, and you can see it's set to multi-box, I switch to perimeter mode, regenerate, and you can see it's broadly the same, but the triangle count is 62, whereas if we switch to multi-box, it is down to 28, so around half, but it would very much depend on the shape. Now, what the new mode does, and that is Voxel-Box here, in example number 5, is it makes a voxel-shaped volume and then breaks that down into a simplified version. And in this case, it's not that necessary, but if we look at this example here, and I recall the settings and switch it over to voxel mode, it will create a lot of separated boxes here, and that's because it's not rotated to sort of the 0 axis. You can also see we've got a little hole here where it's been sort of missed by the voxel system, another one here. And this is a lot of triangles too. This is 272 triangles, but voxel mode generally is good for this kind of shape because we have a lot of concave sections. 1, 2, 3, big one here, 4, 5. So it's mostly concave sections, and the perimeter mode can sometimes struggle to get that right. But if we switch this to voxel mode, so what this will do is it'll break it down and try to find box-like shapes to convert this into like a simplified version of it. And it will go from, where are we, 272 triangles to 100. So it's around a third. Now, obviously, it has heavily simplified it, and that can cause some sort of pushing out into the wall. So in this case, it's better for places where the walls are quite thick, or you don't care if it bleeds into adjoining areas. But this would work very well for this because it's a very low triangle count. Even if the perimeter mode could handle it well, it probably won't get the triangle count this low. So it's very simplified, and it will work great for places where the voxel mode will work, such as this sort of example here, where you've got big spiky shapes, but you want a lower triangle count, and maybe the voxel mode is spitting out too many triangles. So it's really helpful just as an additional edge case situation where you want low triangles, but you've got very concave shapes, and voxel is the right call. So we now have two simplified box-based versions of the generation modes, and that will be multi-box, which uses perimeter mode as its starting point, breaks it down into multi-boxes, or we have Voxel-Box, which is sort of the voxel version of that. And these two box-based modes will now utilize this minimum number of boxes. Let me show you what that does here. So we have a perimeter mode volume here, and I'm just going to regenerate it into multi-box, and we'll see what happens here. Now, in this case, it's just decided, do you know what, it's best to just make it as a single box, but that's simplified it too much, and now the shape is pretty much entirely gone. And so with the minimum number of boxes, because we're in a box-based mode, we can increase this to say, okay, don't use one, use at least two boxes. And then when we regenerate it, you can see now we've got a box here and a box here. Maybe we want more than that. Maybe we want 4. And now you can see that it's starting to represent the shape well, but still keeping a low triangle count of only 60 now. Voxel-Box will use that as well. So let's regenerate this into voxel mode. And you can see here it's kind of created a boxy version of the shape, but let's Voxel-Box that one. And so it will convert this into various boxes. Again, it's oversimplified it. So let's increase it to 3. Now we can see it's starting to respect the shape a little bit better. So this will give you some more options when using the two box modes, makes it a little bit more flexible and can fit the shapes a little bit better. A new advanced feature has been added called Regenerate Replaces Actor. Now, if you're working on a project where regenerating the volume in any way is causing some of your systems to not recognize the change in the editor, this is usually only a cosmetic thing, and a simple reload of the map will fix that problem. But if this has actually been quite problematic for you, you can enable this and it will literally duplicate the asset and it will delete the old one. And that forces Unreal to recognize the change. Now, it is safe to use and it won't cause any problems, with the exception of if you are referencing that volume in any way. In most cases, it won't be a problem. But if you're doing something like, let's do something maybe a bit old school here and open up the level blueprint and create a reference to this spatial volume that I've got here, which is going to compile. If I regenerate this, everything's fine. If I enable Regenerate Replaces Actor, when I regenerate, it will literally duplicate this volume and then delete the old one. And so now, of course, this reference is going to be lost. So let's regenerate. Everything looks fine. But if I recompile, you can see that this is now saying unknown because the volume was deleted. But as you'll see, everything in the map looks fine. This will work just as well as normal. You just have to be really careful not to use this feature if you are also referencing the volumes somewhere else. So it's safe to use typically, but just be aware that that is a limitation. And so if you're getting cases where, say, portals are not updating their color or their status based on the shape of the volume after regenerating, you can enable this and just know that when you regenerate, it will pick up the change. So that's just one example. There's a few other small things, but it's very much dependent on how Unreal is detecting changes. And if you've modified the engine or anything like that, it could happen. Helpful feature, but obviously probably best to leave it off unless you need it. A new barrier feature is the ability to teleport to the closest barrier. So the problem with barriers is that they're often inside geometry. There's actually one in this doorway here, but we can't see it and we can't easily select it. We have the ability to easily select by selecting closest barrier here, and that will select it, and we still can't see it. We can, if we want, show it through the opacity enabling or disabling. But now we also have the ability to teleport to it. So if I'm here and I know that there's a barrier around here and I just want to jump to it, just press that and you will go straight to it. It's just a handy way to kind of jump. I'm just trying to make it easier for you to navigate around the map and jump to things that are of interest to you. So in a previous update, the ability to change the volume class was added to the edit panel. This allowed you to take a volume and switch it out to a different volume class while retaining its shape. This has now been updated to support batching, so you can select multiple volumes in a map and change them all over. And it also better handles volumes that were not made with Volumator. So this means you could port old volumes that were made manually before Volumator and switch them over to a different class, even if they weren't made with Volumator. So I've got 3 audio volumes here, and we're going to change them over to location volumes. And remember, it will retain the old volume, and this is so that you can copy over any settings or any components or anything else. So you've got to remember to delete the old ones. But let's change the volume class here, and now you can see that we have these 3 volumes. Let's just delete them. You can see that we have our original audio volumes still here too. It's just a minor change here, but you'll notice that in the tweak panel, the height adjustments have actually been doubled. So I think previously I'd sort of focused it too much on minute changes, but it seems that people are using this to make larger changes. And so it actually makes more sense for these numbers to be increased. So now it goes all the way up to 200. And so it's a lot easier to make a big change like that, whereas before it would have required double the number of clicks. Just a small change, but hopefully that makes people's lives a little bit better. So there's a bunch of other improvements around optimizations, stop Volumator getting bogged down with data, better undo handling of various things, seeds being remembered when tweaking volumes and attaching volumes to depots. Now check to see if they already are attached to ones. There's loads of little bug fixes and improvements throughout, as always. And of course, this big test map here should help people get the best out of it, which I'm quite excited. It's actually a lot more work than I was expecting, but hopefully it's useful for people. And as always, if you have any questions or requests, please just keep me up to date, let me know, and reach out through email or whatever else. Thank you so much, and enjoy your volume making.